Greetings. Welcome to Live Courageously podcast show number 8 of February 26th of 2022, and my 24th podcast show since I started it a year ago. I just want to start by thanking everyone who's watching the podcast or have watched some of my previous shows. I truly appreciate it, and I appreciate your comments and feedback on the shows. This has been a great weekend. I spent the previous 2 days, some of you may have seen on my social media, Friday and Saturday, with the pilots and the crews of the U.S. Navy and the Marines Blue Angels and the U.S. Air Force's Thunderbirds at the Navy League Air Show in El Centro, California. These men and women pilots that I met are the real Top Guns. Then I started off today, Sunday, being a guest on a friend Tamara Hunter's podcast show, talking about my film producing and my movie that I was lucky to be involved in, Left Behind. And here I am today with you to share my Live Courageously journey. I share today many of the lessons I learned, and I will later, about the last 2 days as how they complement my message here. And Live Courageously has been the conscious theme of my life for the last 3 years since the beginning of the pandemic. And in that time, it's been the unconscious theme for most of my life. So if you haven't seen the 23 previous podcast shows with some of my amazing friends sharing their powerful stories of overcoming all odds and going on to live powerful lives, you can watch them on my John Duffy Live Courageously YouTube channel. And I have another 40 to 50 plus friends planned to be guests on my future shows. So please keep coming back. So why live courageously? Well, because fear is a reaction, but courage is a choice. And I suggest that you consciously choose courage and faith over fear every time you experience fear, to get through life and to deal with whatever life may throw at you in the future. And it will throw stuff at you, and stuff that you don't like or want. So always face that with courage and faith. And today, this show's a little bit different because I've done the 23 previous shows have had guests. And today, one of my guests that a matter of fact, it was two twin brothers who became unavailable for this show. And instead of scrambling and replacing them, I decided to share my life's journey with the audience. And how that came about was a few days ago, I shared the video of a speech I gave a few years ago with my daughter. And she watched it, and I asked her if I should share it on my show. And she said 100%. So that's what I'm doing today with the show. But to give this speech and my life some background, I'm going to share some context to my life, and I'm going to share a short video about the neighborhood I grew up in the South Bronx. And the video shows one side of life during those rough times, and it's a very negative portrayal. And that reality definitely existed and was part of my life growing up. There was a time that there was 40 arson fires a night, and 80% of the housing stock in the decade got burned down by arson. But that is one part, and I want to share that there was also another positive side. The South Bronx was a neighborhood, and I had a great time growing up there, and I had great friends, and they became my family for life until today. So at the end of the day, it's about perspective. And so that perspective is one can see both positive and negative in any situation. And I look back and I'm grateful and I feel blessed for growing up in such a tough environment like the South Bronx. It made me who I am today, Bronx Strong. So let me first share the journey of that video of the South Bronx to give you a little context of what it was, a part of what it was like, the negative part, with you before I share my story. And here we go, and take a look at this video that I share with you. And so that's that. Let me just stop that video so we don't continue that. So that's a little bit of, I think that gives you an idea of a lot of what my youth and teenage years were in the South Bronx, at least a part of it. That was part of the reality of my experience. But like I said, it was not the full story and it wasn't the only story because my life had, like everybody's lives, had a lot of different other aspects to them. And it's kind of funny watching that video as I was preparing for this show because it kind of echoes a lot of what's going on in a lot of urban centers today, again, across the country, whether it's in Baltimore, Chicago, and many other places. So we're seeing a similar thing with the rise of new forms of drugs, new forms of addiction, new forms of hopelessness, and other lack of opportunity and the choices people are making that's putting them in a situation like this. So just want to kind of share a little bit of that background of what my life was growing up so you can kind of understand me. And then what I'm going to share with you now is a speech I gave, and it was at an event in NASA among speakers, and it was called, my title for the speech was Take Two, Give Your Life a Hollywood Ending. And it shares my journey and the lessons that I have going forward. So let me share this with you, and then I'm going to catch you up to date on just how that's kind of, affected me even this weekend and what that was like and the lessons that I draw, but I want to share with you because at the end of the day, this is my story. This has been my life. But what I really want to do and why I do this Live Courageously podcast show is I want to provide the lessons, the mindset, the beliefs, the opportunities that you can adopt in your life so you can live that courageous life, so you can live that life that's going to allow you to have the best fulfilled life. So let me share this speech with you that I gave at Notre Dame, I guess about 5+ years ago. And here we go. And then I'll talk about it a little after it's over. And I'm not sure if you're seeing it. So I realized that. Can anybody comment? Did you see the previous video? Because I'm wondering if anybody saw it. Nothing showed up. Okay, I'm gonna. This is welcome to live podcasting. I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna redo what I just shared with you. So I'm talking about it, and unfortunately, you did not get to see it. So here we go. We're gonna watch New York, the South Bronx first, and I talked about it. I watched it, but you didn't. So here we go. Okay, let's go back. Yes, hopefully this is the right one. Okay, having a little bit of a technical difficulty here, people, so hang in with me. I promise I'm going to get this right. I hope. So here we go. And I'm going to share this and see if this pops up. So it's on the screen. Now the question is, will it play? That is the next question. Oh boy. Huh. Fascinating. All right, let me hold on 1 second. We're going to go and I'm going to find another way to do this because I'm not sure why that's not happening, but it will happen in a minute. So I'm going to probably redo this show at some point, and let's see if I can get us to where we need to go, but I'm not giving up. All right, so let's see if I'm going to share the screen again and see if I can. This was not. think I got it this time, and let's see if it works.
I was born and raised in the Bronx. At one time, the Bronx was a thriving community. But towards the end of the 60s, that started to change. Businesses moved out. Crime moved in. People were left with an overwhelming sense of fear and hopelessness.
No job opportunities, schools being closed down, shop owners leaving. Just imagine World War II bombed out Berlin. It was just a war zone.
Arson, murder, robbery, rape, burglary.
It was considered the murder capital in the United States. The worst ghetto in all of the United States.
At the epicenter of this crime wave was the NYPD's 41st Precinct, also known as Fort Apache.
The 401 was the busiest in the city in all levels of crime.
Hands down, most dangerous square mile in America. Some pretty tough patrol grounds.
So that was my neighborhood, and that's what you a little bit of what it was, and so I think you got a little bit of a flavor for what it was. And I say I lived in the 40th precinct, which is the precinct south of the 41st precinct, and whether theirs was the most dangerous or mine was the most dangerous is who knows, but they were both pretty bad. And that was kind of the life I grew up living in the South Bronx as a teenager and surviving that through. So now like I told you, that was just part of it. The other part was all the friends and family that I made in the South Bronx and who it made me today. So I think given that, let me now try and share the speech that I did with you, and we'll take you through that thing. So let's do that one more time, and let's see if I can get this one to work as well. And here we go. Notre Dame. Wow. Can I get a wow? Wow. This is awesome. This is just awesome. You know, I feel like grabbing a football and running into the end zone and just spiking it. Or maybe just get down on a knee and doing a T-ball and say thank you. That's how it feels to be here. It's a great feeling. And welcome, fellow champions. Give yourself a hand for being here. This is about take two. Give your life a Hollywood ending. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share my life story and some of the lessons I learned and the experiences I had with the goal to try and inspire you to your greatness, and to inspire you to have a Hollywood ending. So as I do that, I'm going to share my journey, and I want you to know my life is, when I look at it back on it, it really feels like a movie. And at best, all I can say is that I was maybe a co-writer and maybe a co-director, but there was someone else who had a bigger vision for my life than myself and gave me that vision. And while I participated, I didn't have this big vision for my life growing up. I had no clue that all these things that I've done would be things that I would be able to be part of and create. So I give thanks for that co-writer and co-director who obviously took me on this path, and I think you know who I'm talking about. So that's kind of my life at the beginning of it. So I'm going to take you on that journey with me, and want to share that life is either a great adventure or it's nothing. And Helen Keller said that, and I think after you hear a little bit of my story, you're going to say, as I feel, I've been on a great adventure. So if you're willing to take this journey with me, I'm going to share that story with you. And it kind of starts out with my parents. And both my parents were Irish immigrants. They came from Ireland during the Great Depression in 1928, met in the Bronx. This here right there is my mother's house, where 7 kids and her mother and father lived in County Mayo. And when they came to America, both of them met in the Bronx, and they came basically for the American dream. And they gave me the American dream. And at a long time when I was young, I never appreciated that I was being given the American dream and you'll see in a minute why maybe it just didn't appear like it was a dream. But in reality, and looking back as to where they came from, as I got older, I had an appreciation of really what I was given and the gratitude for them making that journey to give me my American dream. My father joined the military and fought in the Philippines during World War II and came back and worked in a meat plant in the Bronx. My mother was a domestic servant, a living maid for a while, and then worked in a factory as well. Neither one of them had an education. My mother had a third grade education and my dad had a similar type education. So this is where, whoops, I just think I did, there we go. This is where I grew up, and it's kind of a little bit hard to see on the screen, but up there on the third floor of that apartment, I lived 18 years of my life. And my first memory was in that apartment at the age of 4. And it's not a good memory, and I wish it wasn't my first memory, but it was a memory of my dad dying as I was 4 years old and me crying, basically saying over and over again, "Daddy, don't die, Daddy, don't die." And unfortunately, my prayers weren't answered, and he did. And so my mother ended up having to raise my older brother and myself in that apartment on 2 checks. One was his military veterans check, the VA check, and the other was his Social Security check. And so we were raised in this apartment for 18 years, and it was a tough neighborhood. And eventually the neighborhood changed. It became poorer and poorer, and we were the only Irish and the only white family in the neighborhood as we grew up. You may have heard, there we go, the South Bronx. That's, you may have heard how bad it was. 2 presidents went there because they wanted to use it as an example of urban decay. Jimmy Carter toured my neighborhood, and President Ronald Reagan toured my neighborhood as well. Unfortunately, the neighborhood is still a poor neighborhood. I go back every year and I still have friends there. But it was on the one hand, it was a very poor environment. And like I said, I didn't realize I was being given a dream, but I was. And at the same time, it was a neighborhood, and I made a lot of good friends, and I learned a lot growing up there. Here's another picture of how we played. Obviously, it wasn't your typical playground, jumping off of fire escapes into behind abandoned buildings. But that was my childhood. And it's, quite frankly, I didn't notice that it was all that bad. I mean, I had friends, we had fun, and life was just part of growing up. And, but we had some unique experiences, and I had some unique experiences. This is one, you see it behind me, and it's the Willis Avenue Bridge. It's a bridge that goes between Harlem and Manhattan and the South Bronx. When I was 13 years old, we used to go swimming in a pool in Harlem and then come across this bridge, whoops, how do I go back? There we go. We would walk and go across this bridge at night. And so this is a nice, pretty view of it daytime. It's a little bit scarier at nighttime. And we were going across the bridge, me and a bunch of my older Puerto Rican friends, because I tended to hang out with older kids. And as we were coming back, as we got to one side of the bridge, there was people down below, and my friends started making fun of what they called at the time a wino, which they started giving him a hard time and calling him all kinds of names. Anyway, he ran up the stairs, they ran away, and as I went to go, he caught me. So he grabbed me, and he took me back, and he hung me over the bridge. So here I was, 13 years old, and I'm hanging upside down, backwards over the bridge. And my life is flashing in front of me, and they're gone. Now, that moment was a life lesson for me, and I'll share it, but I'm gonna leave you hanging as I go forward, and we'll come back to that, because that was a moment that gave me a different outlook on life. And I'll share that moment as we get back to that moment. So just let's leave that hanging for a moment. And then the next thing up is 2 years later, at the age of 15, following in my brother's footsteps, I dropped out of high school. So didn't have many role models or any role models for success in my neighborhood. So I just followed the path of least resistance, and next thing I know, I was a high school dropout. And here, I don't know if you've ever had a metaphorical gun pointed to your head, but sometimes in life, you have real ones pointed at your head. And I had experiences 2 years later. After dropping out of high school, I was working in a local grocery store, and I was a clerk and a cashier, and it was just me and the owner, and we were closing up for the night. It was right around the corner from that apartment building. And as I walked around one aisle into the other aisle, the guy puts this gun to my head, and he says, get in the back. So he takes me and the owner in the back of the store, got the gun to my head, and it's another one of those light flashing in front of your eyes moment. And at that point, I realized I had to do some quick talking. The owner didn't want to give up the money. So I had to tell the owner in some rather colorful language about why he should give up the money so we weren't going to get shot. And obviously I convinced the owner gave up the money. The guy with the gun decided that, for whatever reason, he wasn't going to shoot us, and he took the money and he left. It was the first time I had a gun put to my head. I had it done at least 3 more times in my life, and every time I obviously had an ability to talk my way out of it. That's why I'm here. But each one of those things gave me a learning lesson. Even in that moment, I realized that you kind of have to be proactive. I didn't play, and I didn't look back on it as a victim. I just looked at it as something that you got to take in those situations, you got to come up with a solution. My solution was to talk the owner into giving the money and the guy not to shoot me. So I realized that, even in the worst situations, you can act one way or you can act another way. And I learned how to act to survive. So I learned survival really well in this neighborhood. And one of the lessons that made me stronger. Here we go, back, forward. 10 years later, I led, at the age of 26, still a high school dropout, I led a trip to People's Republic of China. That's the Great Wall. And I don't know if you can see me in the picture, but I'm over there on the left side with that hat on. And that was a journey that, once again, the South Bronx took me. I'm not going to get into it because it's a whole nother long journey. But it was, at that point, I had stepped up to be somewhat of what I thought was a leader. And I went down a path that I later realized was the wrong path. And I spent 10 years of my life going down that path. Finally had a course correction and decided that I needed to go into a different path. So I was living in Chicago at the time, and I came back, and I was back to the Bronx, starting all over again, at which point I had to recreate myself, because I spent 10 years of my life being this person that would lead trips to China, that would work to basically try and overthrow the US government and be a revolutionary. And then I realized that that wasn't the path that I wanted to be on, and that wasn't the right path, so I course corrected. So now I'm back in the Bronx and I'm scrambling. I'm trying to do all these things, and I was working hard to try and scramble. So these are just some of the things I did real quick. I was a community organizer. I was an aerobic instructor and a salesman at Jack Lane. I was an oral history interviewer. I was a college student, went back, got my GED and started going to college. I was a substitute teacher. I was a postal worker for 5 years and the mail handler at night shift, and I started acting. So all this was going on in my life, and here's a picture of one of the first movies I acted in. I'm on this side right here. It looks a lot different than I do now, doesn't it? And here's another picture of me, and obviously, no, this is not America's Most Wanted. Don't even go there, Dave. But this is me playing a bad guy in a movie called Bums. So I played a hired killer, and it was my first movie that I started acting in. So I'm doing all this stuff. I'm moving in directions, trying to recreate myself, create a new identity, doing some stuff positive. But it wasn't all positive. I also was doing things that were negative. And the negative things were keeping me stuck and keeping me in a place where I wasn't going to go forward. I was drinking too much, and I had a roommate who I grew up with who was a drug addict and was selling cocaine, and started sharing a lot of it with me. And I started, for the first time in my life, using it. And so I was kind of doing stuff that was harmful and negative. At the same time, I was trying to move forward. So I was in a very stuck place. So I knew I had to get out of there. I had to find a path, find a way, and then life gave me an opportunity. And so going back, this is a thing you may or may not have heard of. It's called The Hero's Journey. Joseph Campbell wrote a book about it, and it's used a lot in film, in the structure of films. A lot of movies use this kind of thing. And this hero's journey is not only a theory about life and films, but it's also affects people's lives. And sometimes you go on it unconsciously, and I would say I went on mine mostly unconsciously, and sometimes you can choose to go on consciously. So here's just some of the moments of it, and you can't even, it's cut off a little bit. But basically, you begin the hero's journey, you go out, and you take on a new thing. You go out of your normal life into a life that is unknown. And during that process, you get tested, and you go through ordeals, and you either rise to the challenge and overcome those tests and overcome those ordeals and keep moving forward. You find a mentor, and you use that mentor, helps you move forward. And if you do all those things, you find yourself creating a life that's no longer normal, no longer ordinary, but creating a life that is basically leads to, quote unquote, a Hollywood ending, but also leads to a better life. So that's the hero's journey, and I kind of went on that. Some ways unconsciously, at the same time, somebody was kind of directing me, and so an opportunity arose. And some movies you may have seen that follow this pattern of the hero's journey is Rocky. It's a famous one, and was one of my favorite movies, which also gave me inspiration after watching the movie, like so many other people. And another one, of course, very linked to Jim Connolly right here, is Rudy, another movie of a hero story. So these are two movies that tell it in film version of what a hero's journey looks like to go from one life to another life and what it takes as far as your character. So here we go. I'm given my opportunity, and I'm working in the post office, and I see a flyer for this thing called the Fire Walk. And I look at it, and I heard a little about this guy called Tony Robbins, and I'm telling you, this was really outside my comfort zone. I had no clue what I was going to do if I went to it, but I just felt instinctively this was something I had to go do. And the good thing was I was working at post office midnight shift at 30th Street. And the fire walk was going to be held on 34th Street at the Manhattan Center. So I could walk to it and walk back to work. And I was like, this is perfect. So I decided to go do this experience, the fire walk. And so I get there and I get into the seminar, and there's this freaking giant. I mean, there's no other way to describe him. He was just 6'8" or whatever size he is, very unusual individual. And he's doing things I've never experienced. He hypnotized us. He put us in a trance, starts telling us that, the week later that we were going to have dreams, and whatever we wanted to change in our life, we were going to change. And I'm going, this is really weird. This is some weird stuff. But it was kind of going in, and there was a lot of lessons that he was teaching in that seminar, including take 100% responsibility for your life, and just so much more, and jam-packed in that one evening. So I'm learning a lot, and I'm finding that this is really changing me. And then the night gets to the end, and we get outside, and we're on 34th Street in Manhattan on a Friday night. And I don't know if you can picture this, but Friday night in Manhattan is just crazy. There's cabs going by, people are beeping their horns, they're screaming, ambulances, police cars, fire trucks. I mean, it's just total noise. And then on the sidewalk, he has 2 lanes of hot poles. And then he got African drummers playing in the background. And I'm going, this is just wild. And everybody, 300 people, we're all out there. We got our shoes off. We're in our bare feet. And we're going, yes, 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 yes. And all the people in Manhattan on 34th Street are looking at us like, who are these crazy people? And people in Manhattan are crazy enough. There's like, now you're at another level of crazy. So here we are, and we're about to do this thing. And I get up to the front, and, you're doing it. He says, make your move. And you do this power move. And you go, boom. And you start, I find myself walking across the thing, cool march, cool march, cool march, cool march. Then you get to the end and you celebrate, yes, yes. And you did it. You walked across hot poles on 34th Street. And I didn't realize at that moment how that was going to transform my life, but it did. It was just, everything in my life changed that night. And I went back to the post office after he took us back up, and he kind of did a reintegration and explained what the process was and what we learned. And I went to work that night, and I was supposed to get in there at 12 o'clock. I came in at about 1:30 or 2 because he runs very late at the seminars back then and still does, I think. And so this is a picture of me with Tony in Maui later. But so I go back to my post office, and I walk in, and all of a sudden it's kind of like, almost like a movie, but there's a light. It feels like there's a light from above, and I'm seeing it for the first time in a new light. And as I look around, I realize I've been there 5 years, 5 long years, and I don't want to be there. And it's not my dream. That's not my vision. And I'm looking, and I just realized in that moment, it was all over. I made a decision that I was no longer going to be a postal worker, that I was going to quit, and I was going to move forward and create my dreams. So in that moment, my life changed. And then, of course, I had to go through the process of quitting and start to make new plans. And just like in the hero's journey, you think when you're introduced to something like that, at least I did, it was going to be all beautiful from that point on. Everything was going to be straight to the top. And so I was ready. I was excited. But of course, life doesn't work that way. And so it didn't go straight to the top. Everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong rather quickly in my life. And so the first thing, I was hit by a drunk driver. My car was destroyed. And as I was standing outside, and the drunk driver drove away and got away. I'm standing there with my girlfriend at the time, and I'm looking at the car, my back hurts, her back hurts, and I start laughing. And she looks at me like I'm crazy. And I go, no more car payments. And I just realized my brain had flipped. Now I was always finding the positive. I couldn't find a negative. It was like, okay, so this is good. And it was like, my mind kept always shifting to what's good about this. And I learned that through the seminar, to find the positive, to find the good, to find the opportunity. So I said, okay, I don't have a car anymore, what else? You know, keep moving. Well, after a little while, that's me with my neck brace. After a little while, I wasn't making the financial stuff that I needed. I was 2 months away from eviction. Everything was going wrong. And then I got hit with the final test, the ordeal, to see whether I was committed to what I believed or what I had just learned, maybe. And an ex-girlfriend of mine who I was very close to was sick with AIDS. And so I ended up spending a lot of time with her. And I was there with her a couple days before she died. I was at the hospital with her. But at one moment before she passed, I went to her house and just kind of spent some time with her and her mother. And we were just laughing and dancing and listening to music. And she told me there was one day when she said where I called her up and I wanted to come visit her. And she said, no, I don't want you to come visit. And she said, you know why I did that? I said, no, why? And she said, well, because I didn't want to depress you. And at that moment, I realized here she was dying, she had AIDS, and she was concerned about depressing me. And in that moment, it was just like everything, once again, I got an insight that all the things that I thought was tough in my life just went in perspective. And I went, you got no problems, God, you got no problems. And you've just been given a gift. And that gift she gave me in that moment also changed my life, because it just gave me the strength, the courage to go forward and to realize that in life, we all get challenged. And if you can step to that challenge, and she gave me that gift. So I was there when she passed. I was a pallbearer at her funeral. And 2 weeks later, I made the decision then that I was leaving for California. And I had $100 and I found somebody who was driving. And so I was a co-driver and I got in the car. It echoes a story that I heard here from Jim Connolly, $100 in California. Yes, sir. And next thing I know, like Lou Holt said, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond to it. So at that moment, I responded that I needed to turn this around and do something good with it. So now I'm headed to Hollywood. I'm in Hollywood, and I see a flyer for them looking for an audition for an actor to write a story about real life and to perform it in a play. I went home that night and I wrote the story about her called Goodbye, My Friend. And I got accepted for the play, and for about 6 weeks, every weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I performed at this theater right there, Goodbye, My Friend. And I opened that wound up and I shared her story and what it meant to me, and I shared it with the audience, and it was both painful and very painful, but also healing. And so that was my journey at that point. And then since then, I was working as a counselor at Covenant House, and now I'm going to do a kind of rush tour. If I wasn't talking fast enough, now I'm going to really go New York on you. And so these started going from in front of the camera to behind the camera. I produced about 25, 30 movies, got another opportunity, and that was very cool. Never expected to do that. Never knew that was going to be what I would be doing for my life. And then this is another movie that we just did recently in Georgia. And then another door opened up, and I got a chance to do training videos for the Marine Corps. And I went to Quantico, went to Camp Pendleton. I met the best men and women I'd ever met in my life. Hoorah! And that opened up a special door for me where I started to get involved in veteran support activity. Here's me with you might recognize that uniform, at the Academy Award with all these great Marines. And I did a lot of activity that's with John Boyd, and once again working with the Marines. And then I ended up, another opportunity opened up where a friend, a Vietnam veteran, said, can you step up and direct this film for me? So I directed this film, The Flag, ended up at the GI Film Festival, and that's me with Gary Sinise, who is a big active guy in the GI Film Festival and supporting vets. So that's a quick run through. That's another picture of the vet. So here I go, from a high school dropout to a college professor at a Catholic university. I went to a Catholic high school that I dropped out of. So I think God has a great sense of humor, because that too wasn't my vision. The high school dropout kid, eventually being a college professor at a Catholic high school, not in my plan. And so that's kind of part of my journey. That's me teaching there. That project is, as they mentioned, is a movie I'm working on, Termite, and that's, you may recognize the big guy on the side right there, Tracy Haynes. And so that's a movie we're working to get made, which is a true story, but I'm not gonna have much time on that. Then back here, so I'm hanging over that bridge, and like you remembered, I'm over there, and I'm hanging, I'm back on the bridge, and I'm over, and I start pleading with the guy not to kill me, not to drop me off the bridge, because it looks a lot scary at night, especially when you're hanging upside down. Trust me, it really is a scary view. It's not the best view to have. And so I think, I'm begging the guy, and I'm pleading with the guy, and finally he just brings me back in. He says, kid, I want you to know something. He said, I'm gonna let you slide this time. He said, but whatever you do, when you go forward in life, make sure that you treat everybody with respect, no matter who they are. Don't treat someone like me any different than you treat anybody else. Well, that message has echoed throughout my life, and it's how I live my life. I don't care who you are, where you come from, what your background is. My first approach to everybody is treat them with respect. And he gave me that gift. It was a hard way to get it. I didn't like to hang over the bridge, but hey, maybe it was a wake-up call that maybe that's the only way God could have gotten to me. So I got it, and I'm really glad that I did get that message. So it's not what happens to you in life, but what you do about it that matters. I think Jim Connolly said that. I think that's his quote. I just put Jim, but I'm sure you know who that is. And so how many success stories do you need to hear before you make your own? Become a hero. I challenge you to go on the hero's journey, to consciously try and create a life where you create a Hollywood ending for your life. And so as I close, I'm going to step down here so I can really get this. I'm going to go a little bit Les Brown, if you know who Les Brown is. So I'm going to finish up with this. If you don't decide to act on your dream, if you don't decide to make a decision to live your life, you don't decide to step into your fears, if you don't decide to say yes to your life, it will never work for you. The time for just wishing is past. The time for doing, that's the time, right now. Time to look around and become creative. When you decide, I'm going to do it, regardless of the opposition, regardless of the difficulty, I'm going to make this happen because it's important to me. I'm saying the universe will yield to you. Life will never be the same. Thank you. God bless. And go Irish.
Go Irish.
All right. Wow. That was a whole lot of stuff there, wasn't it? That was, like I said, 2018, I believe. And I shared that story. So I share the story, and now it kind of, all the connections is, why did I start this show, Live Courageously? And it came to me instinctively a few years ago when I was up in Canada working on a movie during the pandemic. And I just felt that people needed that story. People need to hear that message, to live courageously, to find a way to step up. And clearly, when I look back on my life, a lot of the times it was unconscious that I had to make those choices to be courageous in the face of fear, in the face of things that were very scary. And yet I found a way to keep doing it. And so that's why that speech at Notre Dame was an attempt to share some of my life, but not to brag on it, but was to encourage people to find their path, to find their way to that hero's journey. And that's kind of why I gave that speech at that point, and why I created this show, Live Courageously. And so now to flip back, just kind of like I used the metaphor in that speech of me hanging on the bridge, which all of that is true, and definitely one of the scarier moments of my life. But, to flip back to where I started this show and talking about the experiences I had yesterday, and Friday and Saturday, I went down to this event. I was honored to be invited to this event at the Navy League down in El Centro with what I would consider some amazing people who've gone on heroes' journeys, who have, in my opinion, are heroes. And I had the honor to be there, be invited with my buddy Bob Donovan up to sit with the two captains who run the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds and share dinner with them on a Friday night and get to know them and get to know their stories. I'm gonna just throw up a couple of pictures for you, and then I'm gonna make some of the connections with this. But here is, some of the pictures of where I was. This is El Centro Navy Air Facility, and this was the actual event, Desert Outing. This is some pictures of the two groups of pilots flying in the air for the air show that they put on that we got to observe. So that's a little bit of it. But why do I share all this, or why do I connect this to my story, is because some of you may have seen Maverick, the movie, Top Gun, with just recently, and that shares a very powerful story of who these pilots are. So for me to get the honor to be up close and hang out with them and talk to them and hear their stories and hear why they joined and became pilots and what it goes to be the training of the pilot, just kind of puts in perspective my life about what's possible. And that's kind of the message, I guess, that I shared with my speech, and what the message is of this Live Courageously podcast show that I'll continue to share in the future with, hopefully, all the 50 plus guests that I have, friends of mine, and I call them guests, but friends of mine who will be on the show, and then new friends that I'm going to make. But one of the things, one of the people that I sat with at the table, and one of the captains of the Thunderbirds, and I see if I grab a picture of him. This is a picture of him sitting next to me. He was the captain of the Thunderbirds, and he got up and gave a speech. And the speech he gave wasn't bragging. It wasn't about talking about how him or his pilots, and there's 6 main pilots on each team, 6 Blue Angels, 6 Thunderbirds, and he was the number 1 pilot and the boss man, as they call him, of the pilots, and there's both men and women pilots. And what he talked about in his speech was a couple of things. One was service, that the purpose of why he does it and his pilots do it and the teams, there's about 132 people in each team that support people for the team to be able to make it possible for the 6 pilots to do their job and to put on these air shows, 32 cities throughout the year. But the point he kept driving home was what's most important is service to others, service to a bigger purpose in life, not selfies, not narcissism, not looking at, hey, look at me, but service to others in whatever form that you can provide that service. And that's what he said his job was to be of service to his team, to his community, to his country. And that's why he does what he does. And I got to hear his story, and it was an amazing story because he had the opportunity, he was studying to become an astronaut, and he was given the opportunity of being the head of the Thunderbirds. And he had to choose between either one of them. And he said it was a very hard decision. And he chose to go with being the head of the Thunderbirds. And that's a 3-year commitment that he'll be flying for 3 years at these air shows throughout the country. So he had a choice, but he was given those opportunities because he put himself in and put in the work to be the best of the best. And that's why they are the top guns and are considered that. Not that it's an easy position to get to. It means you have to be the best of the best. And you don't get to be the best unless you put in the effort and the work. So that was the lesson I got from spending some time with him and sharing. And that's kind of what, and yes, it's Live Courageously, because you watch the air show, and if you get a chance, it's going to be in cities all across the country. Get an opportunity, please go see it. Now, we were so honored that we were able to watch this show with about 120 people. When they do the public air shows, there'll be 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 people out there watching it. So they won't have the opportunity to get up close and personal and have the time that we did. So, that was a very special night, night and a day for us. But that's what I encourage you, is to realize that it's about living courageously. It's about being the best you can be. It's about going on that hero's journey, and then also realize it's about service. So that was a little bit of what the thing. And then the other thing, that I share with this story and share with my message is that, I am so freaking thankful, grateful, blessed for the life I live and I've gotten to live. and the people that I get to meet and share time with and get to hear their stories, given where I came from, how is that possible? I mean, it wasn't my plan. It wasn't, I didn't have this worked out. And of, what was the likelihood that I would have got from where I did as I like to say, a kid from the Bronx, to get from that, a high school dropout, to where I am today. It's, the odds are definitely probably harder than winning the lotto. And yet somehow I got here and went on that journey. So that's kind of why I'm just honored and blessed. I'm going to throw up a couple more pictures because, just getting to see these people and talking to them and watch them fly and then talk to them again, these are some of the best. And these are just some of the pilots from the Blue Angels who, she's number 3. The other guy before her was number 5. And then this gentleman, Scott, is number 4. And now Scott, I got a chance to see him, met him last year at the event, and got a chance to know him and know his story about how he became a pilot and such an elite pilot. And so we knew each other from last year. I gave him a copy of the DVD that I directed, The Flag. And then this year, he gave me a challenge coin from the Blue Angels, which obviously is an honor to receive something like that. So, that's the experience I get to have and get to experience, which I just, I feel like I'm a kid sometimes going on these, going to Disneyland with folks like this. And then I get to ask them their stories. Because at the end of the day, what I really love to hear is people's stories and how they became who they became. And on this little 2-day weekend, I got to meet a lot of different people. Some of them were in maintenance on the planes. Some of them were doing PR. Some of them were doing public affairs. Some were doing, logistics, just a whole range of different things that keep an operation like this going. I met one young man who grew up just 15 minutes away from where we were in El Centro. And I wanted to know his story. And he was doing maintenance on the plane. His name was Diego. And he was telling me he worked in bonds. He worked in supermarkets. He worked on a beef farm. And then he got this thing that he was going to get into the military and he wanted to have a bigger life. And he ended up taking that journey and going from a kid in the small community of Brawley, California, to being accepted and then eventually getting into being the support service for the Blue Angels, which, like I said, there's only 130 people working in that capacity for 3 years. And he was just so honored that his life took that step up. And then I shared my story with him and he was just blown away hearing my story because he was like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, no, but look, oh my gosh, your story, because you're a model for other people in your community to what's possible if you make those choices. And it's always about choices because you can make a good choice or a bad choice. He made a good choice. And now he's having an amazing 3-year experience traveling all around America for 3 whole years, supporting a great team of people who are the best of the best. So got to meet him and I'm impressed when I meet people. It's just, I just feel like every time I get to hear something like that, it just enriches my life. So I'm honored to be able to get that opportunity. And then, met another person. I'm sharing stories, which I hope you don't mind. And, it probably sounds like, yeah, boy, this guy can babble. But seriously, I get to meet people and I'm just so excited about it. I'm like a kid. I'm still that kid from the Bronx and I get excited real easy. And so I met this other gentleman, a captain in the Air Force, and he was introduced to me. And of course, like I always do, I'm like, what's your story? How did you become a captain? Tell me what happened. Why did you make that decision to join the military? Share. So I just ask a lot of questions. I just love to ask people what their stories are. So I asked him his story and I did not know what I was going to hear. And apparently he was a pilot, flew many, many missions. He got shot down, older gentleman. He got shot down in 1968 in Vietnam and was a prisoner of war in North Vietnam for 7 years. And during that period of the 7 years as a prisoner of war, he was tortured many, 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 many times. I asked him about that torture. I asked him about his experience in the prison camp, how many people in the prison camp with him. Just kind of asked a lot of questions because I'm fascinated. And then, after it, I was like, So when you came back and, physically you've been tortured, he lost use of his shoulder, just a whole lot of horrible things that happened in Vietnam as a prisoner. And then it was like, well, how do you get to who you are today is the question I asked him. And he says, sir, he said, the biggest lesson is it's about forgiveness. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, it's about forgiving people, because if you don't forgive people, you're going to carry that anger and that hate around with you inside you, and it will hurt you and it will hurt your life forever. And I said to him, so you forgave the people who imprisoned and tortured you? Is that what you're telling me? And he said, 100%. He said, because if you don't, you hurt yourself. And he said, I wanted to move on and have a good life, and my family have a good life, and I needed to let go. And the way you let go is forgiveness. So, wow, powerful, because you realize, I know so many of us know people, families, friends, who won't forgive each other for little things, who get caught up in holding grudges over nothing. And here's a guy who can let go of people, forgive people who tortured him. And then he tells me, because I keep asking questions, he tells me 5 years ago, he got offered an opportunity from the government of North Vietnam, to come back and have spent 2 weeks in Vietnam as their guest and meet with the warden who tortured him. Now I'm like, well, what is this going to lead to? And he basically said, it was a hard decision at first, and then he made the decision to take his wife and go on that journey to kind of put the pieces back together, that experience. And he went and he met with the warden, and he said the warden was not apologetic, and he said the warden said that the best thing that he ever did in his life was keeping his prisoners happy and healthy. And I said, well, he clearly failed at both of those. And we had a laugh together because, yeah, he did fail at those. But he had forgiven this warden who tortured him, and he was able to re-experience it from a different perspective, with a different set of eyes, and with somebody. And you say, of all the kinds of courage, there's the courage of being a pilot. There's the courage that people go into risky places. But here is even a bigger courage, is the courage to forgive. And he had that courage to find that. So, I mean, I get to meet people like this, and I get to hear their stories, and I get to I get to hear their stories because I ask their questions. And, so that's what life has led me. And it's led me from that journey from the South Bronx, that kid that came from a neighborhood that, failure was all around me. And somehow I found a way through that, past that, and forward each time. And then luckily, like the hero's journey in screenplays, but also that I shared on that speech, is you find it by finding mentors. You find people who inspire you, role models, people who help you take your life to the next level. If you look, if you're willing to listen, if you're willing to grow, if you're willing to put in the work. So that's kind of a little bit of, where I am with it. And so let me just see if there's any, because today is a little bit different. I just want to share a couple of comments, and let me see if I can throw this one up. That's from Tom. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. My good brother Christopher, no one has it fully planned out. The universe always has a weird sense of humor. Yes, indeed, Christopher. Another one from Christopher. Hey, watch it, Christopher. That's, you're the guy in the rocking chair on the porch telling stories to the younger generation. Hey, watch that. And then Dave, Dave Alsbach is a Vietnam veteran. My good brother, who I made the film The Flag, directed it for him. He acted in it and wrote it, and I also helped produce it. So welcome, Dave, back at you, man. Much love, brother. Let's see, Ron Carr, whatever. Hey, Ron is a guy who worked with me in the film industry. So, and I'll put one more up. Season, who is a publisher, has a book publishing company, and I hope to work with. It's such powerful stories. Thank you for sharing. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening, for those kind comments. And so I'm going to wrap this up, and as I keep going forward, I want to step the show up. I want to expand it because, like I said, I have 50 friends, personal friends that I know who have powerful stories to share that I want to bring on this show. But then I have probably 50 new friends that I haven't fully met yet that I want to bring on as well. So, I got a lot of work to do. And, if I'm going to get to that sitting on the porch, like Christopher said, telling these stories, I better get busy, Christopher. So, so anyway, so as I wrap up today's show, I just want to say, my journey continues. I have memoirs, 2 memoirs that I wrote to publish. I have books and a screenplay, including Goodbye, My Friend, about the story I shared in that talk that I want to write, produce, and maybe even direct. I have people to interview for my podcast show. I have new goals to set and achieve. I have thousands of books that I want to read and people that I want to inspire, and I want to live a life courageously. So, and wrapping up, all I can say is if a kid from the Bronx like me can do it, you can do it. I encourage you to go on a journey of growth, of change, of risk-taking, and live a life courageously so you can create the life you want and deserve. You always, always, always have a choice in any situation. And no matter where you are today, you can make a choice to create a new life, a better, more fulfilled life going forward, and a life where you can, like I mentioned from that boss of the Thunderbirds, where you provide service to others, where you volunteer, where you create a way to, even if it's one person's life you impact and make better, that you're willing to be of service to others, and you'll live a life that's fulfilled and happy. So I hope you make that choice. I hope that you go on that hero's journey. I hope that you live courageously. And if you can find a way, let me throw up, you can reach me at any of these places right here, my YouTube channel, Live Courageously. You can reach me on Facebook. You can reach me on Instagram and all those wild social media places, or my email, duffsquarefilm@gmail.com. So you can contact me in any way, and please reach out to me. Hope you enjoyed the show and you were inspired a little bit by my message of hope and my journey and faith over fear and living courageously. So I'd love to get your feedback on what you enjoyed while watching the show, any suggestions you may have on how I can improve it and grow the audience for it. And please share it and help me spread the message to live courageously. Join me every Sunday, next Sunday at 2 p.m. and every other Sunday at 2 p.m. and meet the great friends that I've been blessed with in life. And so live courageously, make your life a masterpiece, and may God bless you until we meet again next Sunday. Have a great one. Bye.